New York Times bestseller, Only Yesterday, an informal history of the 1920s. Frederick Lewis Allen. Preface. This book is an attempt to tell and in some measure to interpret the story of what in the future may be considered a distinct era in American history. The 11 years between the end of the war with Germany, November 11, 1980, and the stock market panic which culminated on November 13, 1929, hastening and dramatizing the destruction of what had been known as Coolidge and Hoover prosperity. Obviously, the writing of history so soon after the event has involved breaking much new ground. Professor Preston Williams Slauson, in The Great Crusade and After, has carried his story almost to the end of this period, but the schema of his book is quite different from that of mine. And although many other books have dealt with one aspect of the period or another, I have been somewhat surprised to find how many of the events of those years have never before been chronicled in full. For example, the story of the Harding scandals, insofar as it is now known, has never been written before except in fragments, and although the big bull market has been analyzed and discussed 1,000 times, it has never been fully presented in narrative form as the extraordinary economic and social phenomenon which it was. Further research will undoubtedly disclose errors and deficiencies in the book, and the passage of time will reveal the short-sightedness of many of my judgments and interpretations. A contemporary history is bound to be anything but definitive, yet half the enjoyment of writing it has lain in the effort to reduce to some sort of logical and coherent order a mass of material untouched by any previous historian. And I have wondered whether some readers might not be interested and perhaps amused to find events and circumstances which they remember well, which seem to have happened only yesterday, woven into pattern which at least masquerades as history. One advantage the book will have over most histories: hardly anyone old enough to read it can fail to remember the entire period with which it deals. As for my emphasis upon the changing state of the public mind and upon the sometimes trivial happenings with which it was preoccupied, this has been deliberate. It has seemed to me that one who writes at such close range, while recollection is still fresh, has a special opportunity to record the fads and fashions and follies of the time, the things which millions of people thought about and talked about and became excited about, and which at once touched their daily lives, and that he may prudently leave to subsequent historians certain events and policies, particularly in the field of foreign affairs, the effect of which upon the life of the ordinary citizen was less immediate and may not be fully measurable for a long time. I am in debt to Mr. Mark Sullivan for what he has done in the successive volumes of Our Own Times to develop this method of writing contemporary history. Naturally, I have attempted to bring together the innumerable threads of the story so as to reveal the fundamental trends in our national life and national thought during the 1920s. In an effort to eliminate footnotes and at the same time to express my numerous obligations, I have added an appendix listing my principal sources. Prelude, May 1919. If time were suddenly to turn back to the earliest days of the post-war decade, and you were to look about you, what would seem strange to you? Since 1919, the circumstances of American life have been transformed, yes, but actually how? Let us refresh our memories by following a moderately well-to-do young couple of Cleveland or Boston or Seattle or Baltimore. It hardly matters which, through the routine of an ordinary day in May 1919, I select that particular date 6 months after the armistice of 1918, because by then the United States had largely succeeded in turning from the ways of war to those of peace. Yet the profound alterations wrought by the post-war decade had hardly begun to take place. There is no better way of suggesting what the passage of few years has done to change you and me and the environment in which we live. From the appearance of Mr. Smith as he comes to the breakfast table on this May morning in 1919, you would hardly know that you are not in the 1930s, though you might perhaps be struck by the narrowness of his trousers. The movement of men's fashions is glacial. It is different, however, with Mrs. Smith. She comes to breakfast in a suit, the skirt of which, rather tight at the ankles, hangs just 6 inches from the ground. She has read in Waggy the alarming news that skirts may become even shorter, and that not since the days of the Bourbons has the woman of fashion been visible so far above the ankle. But 6 inches is still the orthodox clearance. She wears low shoes now, for spring has come. But all last winter she protected her ankles either with spats or with high-laced walking boots, or with high patent leather shoes with contrasting buckskin tops. Her stockings are black, or tan perhaps if she wears tan shoes. The idea of flesh-colored stockings would appall her. A few minutes ago, Mrs. Smith was surrounding herself with an envelope, chemise, and a petticoat, and from the thick ruffles on her undergarments, it was apparent that she was not disposed to make herself more boyish in form than ample nature intended.